one of the things that I like to do is kind of back out from that rooftop level to more of the bird's eye level. And so it's kind of backing out away and looking at more of what's happening, the historical context of what's happening at this time in history. And you get that from the very beginning of the book of John when he says, I came to my own, but they did not receive me, back in chapter 1, verse 11. Now, we all know that his own does not refer to the elect of Calvinism or something of that sort. Even Calvinists don't interpret that way. It means, obviously, the Jewish people, Israelites, his own countrymen. So I came to my own countrymen, but they did not receive me. Now, the big question here is, why aren't they receiving him? Is it because they were born with this default condition, like James White puts it, of total inability, where they can't receive him, no matter how convincing Moses was, no matter how much the prophets taught, and they just can't believe because of this innate condition from birth that they were born with due to the fall of Adam. They were just born in this condition. Unless God regenerates them first, they will just always not believe what Moses said. They will not believe the prophets. They will not believe anything that the Father has revealed to them because of this incarnate condition. Is that the reason that his own aren't receiving him? Now, you can't assume that that's the reason. You have to establish that that's the reason. And that's what I think Calvinists, one of the mistakes that James White and other Calvinists make, is they just assume their doctrine of total inability, the T of tulip, and basically says, well, the reason they're not receiving him is because of this innate condition. Well, I don't believe that. I believe they could have received him. They could have listened to Moses. They could have, but because they chose, not all of them, obviously, but generally speaking, the swath of them, and the Bible does speak in generalities with regard to Jew and Gentile quite regularly. We see this throughout the Scripture. We see this in Acts chapter 28 when Paul says he's tried to convince them all day long, and then he rebukes them, saying, "You're ever seeing and never perceiving. You're ever hearing and never understanding." That's not a condition from birth, by the way. That's a condition of these Israelites who have grown calloused. Even says their hearts have become calloused because you've closed your eyes. Otherwise, you might see, hear, understand, and turn, and I would heal you. Therefore, I take the message to the Gentiles. They'll listen. Verse 28 of chapter 28 in Acts. So this is a contrast between generally the Jew and the Gentiles. This, again, the bird's eye view of what's happening historically. The Jews, generally speaking, are rejecting their Messiah. The Gentiles, generally speaking, are receiving him. To those who receive him, he gives the right to become children of God. You mean the barbarian Gentiles who didn't follow a law on the day of their life are given the right to become a child of God? Yes. To those who receive him, to those who believe it upon his name. Back to Romans 9, the very last verses of Romans 9, which James White ironically didn't get to in his opener, talking about the Jews who have pursued it through fleshly running, through works of the law. They have not attained this righteousness, but who has attained it? The Gentiles have attained it. How? They pursued it through faith. They pursued, both of them are pursuing. One's pursuing it through works, the other pursuing through faith. So it's not a anti-pursuit thing. It is a, who are you pursuing? Are you pursuing salvation and righteousness through the law or through Christ? And it's through Christ, not the law. Paul's point, obviously, is that throughout the book of Romans 9 all the way through 11, which we can get into later. But that's the context of this. And so this is a Jewish audience that he's addressing here in chapter 6. It's the same type of audience that you see in John chapter 2, verse 23, when he says they're following him, just the same as we have here. Big old crowd following him. But he knows the condition of their heart, it says, and he does not entrust himself to them. In other words, he knows why they're there. They're there to get their bellies filled, as we see. They're there to see signs and wonders, as we see. They're there for all these selfish motivations, but it's not because they listen and learn from the Father. It's not because they genuinely have faith in God, like we see from Simeon, for example, who would have been a Jew of that day that did have genuine faith. It was a God-fearing man. A Gentile like Cornelius, who we see in Acts chapter 10, who genuinely feared the Lord. And because of this, God sent him a vision and to call from Peter from Joppa so that he could hear the message of Christ. In other words, these are people who genuinely had faith in the Father prior to even knowing what the gospel was or receiving the Holy Spirit. And so you've got to remember that is the context in which Jesus is coming into this world. He's coming into a world where there are, yes, a remnant of Jewish believers who have listened and learned from the Father and are now being drawn to believe in his Son and revealed the Son to them. But there's a swath of Jewish people who have grown calloused and hardened in their
Right.
rebellion. They've become the old wineskin that can't take the new wine, as Jesus put it. This is not a condition from birth, mind you, like the Calvinistic system would imply. No, this is a condition they have grown into because they've refused to listen to Moses. John chapter 5 gets into this. Moses, if you believe Moses, you'd believe me because he spoke of me. Because you've rejected Moses, you're going to reject me because we have the same voice. Father and the Son are the same. This is the context throughout the entire book of John. He says it over and over and over again, that the Father and I are one. If you believe what the Father said, you believe me because we do the same thing. Sheep in chapter 10, same thing. You're not a follower of me, a sheep of me. Why? Because you're not a follower of the Father who sent me. If you believed the Father and you knew his voice, you would know my voice, because the sheep know the voice of their shepherd. And my voice is the same as the Father's voice. That's his point there. Calvinists erroneously interpret sheep to mean unconditionally elected before the foundation of the world. And it no first century Jew would have understood sheep to mean that. They would have understood sheep to mean follower. You followed the Father, you're going to follow me. The reason you're not a follower of me is because you never followed the Father. Which is exactly, if you read that context of chapter 10, he goes on to describe that very thing in talking about how he and the Father are one. It's about the unity of the Father and the Son. It's not about unconditional election, irresistible grace, or something of that nature, like the Calvinists read into it. So once you get that context and you understand, I've come to my own people, generally speaking, are rejecting me because of this condition. They have become ever seeing, never perceiving, ever hearing, never understanding. They've grown calloused and hardened because they have closed their eyes, and now I'm hiding it from them. We see this in Luke when Jesus weeps over Israel, and he says, oh, that you have known in this day the things that are made for peace, but now they have been hidden from your eyes. What's he saying? Hidden from your eyes? What are you talking about? This is what's referred to as judicial hardening, or blinding somebody. It's giving somebody over to their fleshly ways. It's saying, okay, you want to go that direction, prodigal son? Here it is.
Right.
Go squander.
Exactly.
Go do what you want to do. And he's hiding the truth from them. He's blinding them from the truth. How do I know this? Jesus even says to the disciples, Mark 9:9, for example, when he come down from the Mount of Transfiguration, he performed all these miracles and obvious things that, display his divinity. And he says, guys, don't tell anybody about this yet. Not until the Son of Man is lifted up, then you can tell them. Okay? Then you can speak about this. But until then, we're not drawing people to me yet. We're not telling people about me yet. I need them to crucify me. And this is under the scenes. He's not saying that, obviously, but under the scenes, we know that he's going to the cross. This is his purpose in electing Israel, is that through their unbelief at this time in history, he's going to accomplish redemption through them. And so he's not drawing them yet. It's not until chapter 12, verse 32, where he says, once I'm raised up, I will draw all men to myself. And so we know he's not drawing all men to himself at this time in John chapter 6. He's actually blinding them in their own rebellion. How does he blind them? What means does Jesus use to blind Israelites? Well, according to Mark chapter 4 and Matthew chapter 13, which are parallel synoptic passages, he's using parables and difficult symbolic speech to keep them in the dark. And even says, one of the disciples asked Jesus, why are you speaking to them in riddles? What are you doing? And Jesus says, well, these truths have been granted to you, but not to them, not to those on the outside, lest they see, hear, understand, and turn, and I would heal them. In other words, he's keeping them in the dark. And he's doing this for a purpose, so as to get to Calvary. He's got a purpose in blinding them. It's a temporary hardening, as even Paul explains in chapter 11 of Romans. And it's a blinding of people who are already rebellious by their own free choice, mind you, not an innate condition from birth that they couldn't help or something of that nature. It's their judgment upon them for their rebellion against Moses, their rebellion against David, their rebellion against the Father's teaching and prophecies. And he's using them in that rebellion. And so literally says in chapter 4 of Mark and in Matthew 13, he, from this point forward, only spoke to them in parables. And then he would gather his own disciples and explain to them what he meant by the parable. He wasn't telling everybody. He was keeping them in the dark purposefully. And it was difficult language. It was parabolic language like, eat my flesh and drink my blood, without saying, well, wait, guys, don't leave yet. I don't literally mean take a bite out of my arm. And, I'm not talking about cannibalism here. He doesn't try to stop them. He simply lets them go on believing their lies and being in their rebellion. Why? Because he's hardening them. He's judicially hardening them in their rebellion so as to accomplish redemption. These are the same people who are crying out, crucify him,
right,
on that dreadful day. And they would not have done that had thousands of them come to faith there in John chapter 6. So all of that needs to be understood when you come into the text, because it establishes the context. It establishes what's going on. This is a Jewish audience of calloused unbelievers who are there for filling their bellies. They are religious and self-righteous. They think they've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
They hate the fact that he's claiming to be divine. It's blasphemous to them because he's claiming more authority than they have. They hate that. That's the condition of these people's hearts.